Do you want this helmet, or how about this brand new one-up chain guide? All three of these items are brand new. All you got to do is subscribe and you will be entered for a chance to win one of these three items. So once again, thanks for your time. This is a way for me to show appreciation, and yeah, on to the video. What is up, guys? We are talking today about the 5 most influential mountain bikes and downhill bikes over the past 10 plus years. Now, this is by no means a comprehensive list. This is a sort of first of many list. I am a big fan of everything mountain biking, cycling, downhill racing, bike technology, you name it. I am a all-around bike nerd and cycling enthusiast, from road to downhill, but downhill definitely has a special place in my heart. I race downhill myself, been mountain biking for a long time, and I thought it would be fun to talk about sort of the notable bikes that have come out that are, in my opinion, really significant, and secondly, very influential. So this is, again, not a comprehensive list. This is one of many. But instead of doing a 5-hour video talking about all the 50 influential bikes, this is just the first one. So let's get into it. The first bike that I have to talk about is one that many of you that have been mountain biking for a while are going to immediately remember how important this bike was, and that is the 2014 Specialized Enduro 29. This bike changed the game overnight. No other bike company at this time had yet offered a 29er that was as aggressive, as capable, and had as much travel as the Enduro. Many of you watching are going to laugh at this, but there was a sort of narrative for many years that 29ers are not going to be well suited to aggressive riders, to long travel trail bikes, and especially downhill bikes. It's funny because guess what downhill bike I have right now? A Specialized Demo 29 or mullet. I'm running it in the 29. I have a 29-inch trail bike, and I would imagine many of you have long traveled 29ers. But believe it or not, the Specialized Enduro broke the mold and broke the theory that this was not going to be possible, partly because of the design constraints. The wheel in a 29er is bigger than a 27, and it is more challenging to fit it in the bike, especially in regards to what was expected at that time. And this is one part of the era that I did not like. People liked short chainstays, so most companies and riders did not want a long 440, 445, 450 millimeter long chainstay, and so companies had this design constraint where if they were to release a long travel 29er, they had to do it with a short chainstay. And I don't know what exactly the number is for the Enduro, but it is unbelievably short. I don't actually like short chainstays. I'm not talking about the bike for that reason. I'm talking about it because they are a big reason that we now have, not to say that it wasn't going to happen, but they were the forerunner of really making people realize, wow, 29ers are better. And I can tell you a funny story. I was late to the 29er bandwagon, coming from a gravity background, as I imagine many of you had a kind of, not negativity, but I thought bigger wheels were for cross-country guys and road bikes and trail guys. I got on my first 29-inch trail bike. 2 minutes later, done, over. 29 is better. It took me all of 2 minutes. It was end of discussion. I imagine many of you listening had the same experience. 2014 Specialized Enduro 29 changed the game. It still looks absolutely fantastic, and they made waves overnight. Everybody that rode it pretty much came away saying, this is the future. And now we are in a time where pretty much you're hard pressed to find a long travel bike that does not at least have a 29er in the front or a full 29. 27.5 wheels are cool. I'm not hating on them by any means. I myself prefer a full 29-inch setup, funny enough, but this is the bike that really started it. So first bike down, the 2014 Specialized Enduro 29. The next bike I'm going to talk about, and it's funny, if you see the slideshow, I did not write the word controversy. Again, for many of you people that remember, you are going to be chuckling and laughing at all the controversy that us downhill nerds, myself included, were getting up in arms. The first 29-inch downhill bike that showed up at a World Cup downhill race being piloted by Greg Minnaar, Lucas Shaw, and Loris Vergier, I believe. I'm not sure who was on the team yet, but definitely Shaw and Greg Minnaar. And this was in 2017. This was before any 29-inch downhill bike. They were the first showing up on a full 29-inch V10. You can see the custom fabricated rear end to accommodate the wheel. I'm not exaggerating when I say people were furious. I mean, not like aggressively furious, but were upset, were angry. They wanted the UCI to step in and say, no, this is not okay. And it's funny remembering all this controversy, because now every single one of those people, myself included, are on 29ers, because as soon as you ride it, whatever irrational, silly, nonsensical reason that you didn't like them went away because you went, it just is better, pretty much, period. But I still remember how much waves in this slide. You can see it. This is from Vital. I did not add the word controversy. That was the first thing that came up when you type in the 2017 29 V10. They qualified, I believe, in the top 5 of that first race, and people were like, oh, it's just because the wheel. And it's just funny looking back at it now, because now it is pretty much ubiquitous. But believe it or not, at the time, people did not like it. And the Santa Cruz, and I believe Greg Minnaar was really probably influential in it, they are what started it. They're the first ones to pull the trigger, and now we're all riding either full mullets or full 29-inch setup. So it's funny looking back and remember all the hate they got. The next bike is the YT Capra. They introduced this bike in 2014, and it remained relatively unchanged from 14 to 16. And a good example of how far ahead the Specialized Enduro was, YT did not release a 29 version of the Capra until 2018, 4 years later. So just a good sort of anecdotal example of how far Specialized was ahead. But that doesn't change the fact that the reason the Capra, when it came out, changed the game is its performance to its price. This was a bike that was unbelievably dialed. You can just look at how good looking it is. You had multiple options for suspension, and more than anything, they redefined the performance to price ratio. They arguably still are. If someone was asking my opinion and they wanted the best bang for their buck in the mountain biking, done, period, hands down, it's YT. Don't even say a second company, and I'm not including some like ultra discounted deal, but in terms of fundamental bang for buck and performance, I'm not saying bang for buck as though this is some secondary crap bike. Aaron Gwin dominated on the YT 2S for many years. Literally his first race, he raced on it, he won it. This was a bone stock bike. So the engineers over there at YT are some of the best in the business, but you just happen to get that technology for approximately half of what other companies do. I got a Specialized demo. I've also had Trek bikes. It is no secret that if you're going for value, you are never going to be going the way of Trek or Specialized. There is a premium that you pay for it, especially Specialized, in Trek too, but perhaps to a lesser extent. But YT changed the game. I remember when I got into this sport, how much worse the bang for buck is relative to today. Now, bikes are expensive, we know that, but man, what you can get today for a couple $1,000s, performance-wise, so many times eclipses what you could get it back in, for example, 2012. And a big reason for that is YT Industries. The next bike is really a bike only the mountain bike nerds are really going to remember how important, and when I say mountain bike nerd, myself included, and we are now in an era where the long travel, quote unquote, super enduro bike is very commonplace. But the first bike to really do this was the GT Sanction. This was designed with pretty much the whole family of G. Atherton, Dan Atherton, Rachel Atherton, and Martin Mays. And this was so much more aggressive than anything else at the time. If you look at a lot of reach numbers in 2014, a medium bike would routinely be 400 millimeters, maybe 410 millimeters. Well, the Sanctions medium came in at 437, which is pretty comparable to today. It's not as aggressive as many bikes are today, but at the time, that was literally well over an inch longer than many other bikes. The head angle, I believe, was 65, and the just purpose of this bike was a pure enduro race thoroughbred. It was not intended to be super light, and you can just see from the sort of design inspiration of the GT Fury bike that the Athertons were pretty much single-handedly responsible for designing. This is a clear-cut mini downhill bike, and while it is commonplace today, it was kind of the first of its time, or the first of its kind. And I remember when it came out, people were like, whoa, this thing is so much more aggressive than a trail bike. And it's funny because they talked about designing it for enduro racing, and now there was a whole class of bikes called the sort of enduro bikes that took the cue from this GT Sanction and the Atherton family and are pretty much now still abiding by the theory that they sort of laid out. So the GT Sanction was really kind of the first super enduro bike. And that leads me to the Trek Session 9.9. So this is probably, not to sound like a total dork, this is probably the most Gucci envy downhill bike that ever existed. The Trek Session 9.9. For those of you unaware, this is one of the few, if only, large manufacturer production downhill bikes that were handmade in the USA using the latest and greatest carbon fiber. This version was not the full carbon frame that would eventually come out years later. This was a full carbon front end, a really cool looking magnesium rocker link, I believe carbon fiber seat stay, or either a carbon fiber seat stay, aluminum chain stay, or both a aluminum chain stay and seat stay. But ultimately, not only changed the game in terms of the level of quality and craftsmanship that a downhill bike would see being handmade in the US. This thing, the frame was like, I believe, 4,500, 4,900, common territory for super high-end Pinarello, Colnago, Trek, and Specialized road bikes, but very uncommon for mountain bikes. But what made it even cooler is it was piloted by one of the greatest downhill racers, Aaron Gwin. And while there isn't necessarily any revelatory technology or game-changing sort of concept behind the bike, they did execute it really well. And Aaron Gwin went to dominate the sport on this bike, and you still hear the common expression, it looks like a session. Well, that is because they kind of got it right the first time. It works well, it's simple, it's reliable, it was freakishly light, and it's funny, now we don't really prioritize lightweight like we did. Well, you could build this bike down to like 32 pounds, 33 pounds, which is actually a disadvantage in downhill racing, but the frame was featherly light, a handmade carbon fiber USA manufactured downhill bike from Trek. They no longer make this bike. They no longer offer a carbon fiber session. And so I believe the last year was maybe, I don't even remember, but I assume the economics of it and ultimately carbon becoming less, sort of enviable in the sport led them to sort of move away from it, and the sessions that are currently available are all aluminum. But I still believe the Trek Session 9.9 from the sort of, I don't know when it first came out, but from, let's say, 2011 to 2018 were and still are among the nicest, most gorgeous, most enviable bikes out there. My personal favorite was the Atherton era red and white logo. Whew. You show up with that bike, you are looking like a boss. Anyways, that is the first list of the bikes that I find to be among the most influential. It is not comprehensive. There is many lists to come. I just thought these are 5 of the bikes that, in my experience, really were important and noteworthy. I want to hear what you guys think. Agree, disagree. What other bikes did I leave off that are equally or even more important? I love creating this dialogue because I know many of you are as passionate about this as I am. So I want to hear your ideas. what bikes are really influential, what bikes do we need to talk about for the next video. And so leave me a comment and hope you enjoy the video.